your branch to think about that, because Drew's been very much funding his campaign out of his super, so it was really thoughtful. Yes, but what I wanted to talk about today were some of the marine impacts from the expansion of coal and coal seam gas. It's mainly coal seam gas that I'll be talking about. I haven't got anything specific here on the Gold Coast, but I can talk about that when we get through the main points, if you like, because there will be some impacts on your region. Okay, thanks, Katrina. Yes, the township that's going to have the greatest impact, and the part of our coastline that's going to have the greatest impact, is definitely Gladstone. It's being earmarked to become a major hub for the CSG exports from the Surat and from the Clarence-Moreton basins. And I guess that is one impact that will affect your area, because they're still debating where the pipelines from northern New South Wales will go. There's definitely one earmarked to go across the scenic rim near Kyogle, link up near Ipswich, then join the main pipeline travelling for I think overall the pipeline's 4,000 kilometres, because it's got to come from the west as well. But there's talk too, of course, of a second pipeline coming. Well, we're not sure where exactly the easement will be, but it could come behind the Gold Coast through Logan to the Port of Brisbane. And they're trying to evade the normal EIS processes at this stage by describing it as an existing gas pipeline, because of course there is a natural gas pipeline already, but this will be an additional series of piping for CSG from northern New South Wales. Okay. But that's not the end of the story. Just yesterday, Sterling Hinchcliffe, as the Minister for Mining, was boasting of the massive number of mines, 23 new mines approved in the Bowen Basin and 12 CSG projects under planning for the Bowen Basin. Now, some of the Department of Mining and Energy's online maps show a pipeline from the Bowen Basin going south to Gladstone. Others show pipelines going north to Bowen and Townsville. So there are massive expansions planned for Dalrymple Bay, Hay Point. Dalrymple Bay and Hay Point are already existing terminals. They want a third, these are all within a couple of kilometres of one another, just south of Mackay. They want to do a new one at Dudgeon Point, and they've already got an existing coal terminal at Abbott Point. They're talking about a 7-fold expansion. I'll talk a bit more about Abbott Point in a moment. So all of these planned port expansions are in Great Barrier Reef Marine Park waters. So they're all going to lead to massive increases in shipping through the reef, including increasing the risk of groundings, of leakage, and of course of ship fires. This is an aerial shot courtesy of Patricia Julian from Mackay Conservation Group of the wetlands that abut Abbott Point. They're nationally significant wetlands, but tragically they are not Ramsar listed. So there's no official protection of them, even though the federal and state governments both recognise that they are significant. And what you can see in the foreground is that there's the existing coal terminal with one huge jetty there and the coal stacks behind, and then the wetlands nicely captured. There are actually plans for 7 more of those jetties. Wow. And this is particularly tragic. I mean, those jetties and what they're calling a multi-cargo facility, which will be built by the Port Authority, will enclose up to 580 hectares of the Great Barrier Reef, and there will be requirements to drill the coral reef because they have to deepen the channel. They want to bring in much bigger tankers, and just the increase in shipping means they're going to need to deepen and widen the existing channels. But it's also particularly sad for the wetlands behind, because they aren't planning any buffer zone. They need to increase the coal storage capacity, and they want to put an LNG plant, at least one for these 12 new projects, LNG plant on the wetlands, and they've already earmarked it as a mineral processing area. They've been talking to overseas corporations about petroleum refinery and other minerals processing that will be located, which means they're going to drain at least 2/3 and reclaim the wetlands to do it. And that's really sad for all the bird life that frequent the Cayley wetlands, as they're called. something like 20,000 bird species are there at any one time, although it varies of course with the seasons, but also the most northern nesting site is the swamp.
Did I hear there were 60 dugongs dead dugongs washed up and something like 252?
I've got the figures, it's much more turtles than that. I've actually got that on the slide towards the end. It's really sad. Yeah. Yeah, so there we go. That's just the figure for the 20,000 birds, and another lovely shot of it. Patricia Julians and Marie McDonald have between them captured some beautiful photos of these wetlands, but I've just put a couple on for today. This is another good aerial shot from the north, just giving you an idea of what a beautiful area it is and what we're going to be losing. You can't see Bowen itself in the shot, but you certainly get an idea of this lovely coastline. I also like this shot because it shows you the shallow waters and why it is that it's going to require a big dredging program.
Just got 2 extra people.
Lovely, sure.
Sorry, Libby.
No problem. Okay. Yeah, okay. The other big plants, though, that are underway are those on Curtis Island near Gladstone. So coal seam gas is drilled from the coal beds, and they bring up lots of water with it. So they have pipelines to extract the water from the gas. They have pipelines for the gas. They're then going to build this pipeline to Gladstone. It's then going to cross the Narrows, which is this channel that separates Curtis Island from the mainland. And then in these LNG plants, in that they chill the coal seam gas so that it is easier to transport, it reduces its volume, and that's why they call it LNG at that point, liquefied natural gas. It's a great shame that over the years, I mean, there was always talk over the last 20, 30, 40 years about, you know, should Curtis Island have been declared a national park. It's only got 2 small national parks, and the state government has always argued no point because it was once grazing land. I've actually got a map coming up. Most of the vegetation on that island is still intact. There's significant remnant ecosystems intact across this island. It's largely state forest. The grazing leases were surrendered years ago. So the light grey are the state forests. The darker grey are the national parks on the eastern side. And then down on the southeast, you can just see there's another darker patch. That's a conservation area because it's known nesting sites for flat-backed turtles. Okay. This is just a photo. Drew and I went up to Gladstone in July to see for ourselves what was happening. I was, you know, everybody knows that Gladstone's been industrialised since the 1960s, and that again has been an argument the state government uses. You know, Gladstone's already wrecked, it's already industrialised, there's no point. I was just amazed at how beautiful the harbour continues to be, because at the moment, Curtis, Queen and Facing Islands are largely undeveloped. Gladstone people love having access to those islands for camping and boating and fishing, and the locals, because they are still all have significant vegetation, talk about them as the lungs for this township, which is suffering such dreadful air pollution. And this was just one shot. I mean, you can see there's port developments right on the foreshore of the mainland, but the harbour itself and the islands, particularly Curtis, Queen and Facing Islands, which create the harbour, are still really beautiful and relatively untouched. This is the map showing the remnant vegetation. The dark pink, well, it's not really, it's come up with sort of a coral pink on this map. That's the endangered regional ecosystems on the island. And the white, there's only a patch of white up the north, and that's where there's no longer any remnant vegetation where it's been destroyed. So you can see it's sort of 95% in good condition. The LNG plants are all going on down here. This is Graham Creek, and Graham Creek is the start of the Dugong Sanctuary, and they've already started construction along that southwestern portion. Yes, and this is from one of the. This is actually a legally reproduced aerial shot from one of the EIS documents. I'm reusing it because the shaded part at the top is Great Barrier Reef Marine Park, and then the non-shaded part is the start of the Dugong Sanctuary. The Port Authority, Gladstone Port Authority, was trying to pressure all the LNG corporations to also build a bridge across to the island. So far, the corporations have refused to do that, but there will be a pipeline across at that point. Yeah, so this is just another map showing the Dugong Sanctuary, which was declared in 2002 and goes all the way south to what they call Rodd's Peninsula and Rodd's Bay. And that's because there's about 7,000 hectares of seagrass bed in the shallow waters of Gladstone Harbour. Seagrass meadows, I mean. It's terribly sad that they gave approval, both state and federal, to the 3 LNG plants already. You're right, come on in. GLNG is the Gladstone. The corporations give different names to their plants, so it gets a bit confusing when you hear Gladstone people talking about projects with people at Tara talking about projects, because the corporations just give their plants a different name. Gladstone LNG is Santos Corporation, and their EIS acknowledged the EIS documents are huge, multi-volumes, and in one of their appendices they had to look at sound impacts, and I actually took this list of endangered and vulnerable species which they acknowledged would be impacted by sound, and so you can just see what a rich marine environment Gladstone actually is. Hi, there's still a couple of seats. So yes, the green turtles are the ones that have been really suffering through the latest species that the state government has been acknowledging high numbers of deaths of dugongs, dolphins, and it's largely the green turtle that has been washing up dead. And of course they're all vulnerable. And the loggerhead is endangered, as is the water mouse and Pacific Red.
So the dugong, they're saying that those green turtles are dead in summer because of the floods. And do you know of any other impacts that are...
Yes, there's numerous impacts, and it's quite unreasonable. But we might talk about that when I get to the slide that is the death of the
Why don't you go behind the other?
She doesn't want to let me sit there.
Okay. This is just some photographs of the flatback turtles at different stages of their life. The females can't breed till they're 20 years old, and they're also the one turtle that is only endemic to Australia. The green turtles, the loggerheads, are found in other parts of the Pacific. But the flatback is endemic, and its main nesting sites are Queensland, and there's only 3, and I think the next slide might have there. Yeah, this is what's particularly sad for the flatback turtle. They've got that small conservation park on Curtis Island Preserve that will hopefully protect the nesting sites on Curtis. Their other nesting sites are just north of Shoalwater Bay, and of course this is where all the new port developments south of Mackay are going to go. And then it's got one other nesting site way up in the north. So, you know, there's real doubts as to whether either level of government really seriously took cumulative impacts into account. They asked the companies to comment on cumulative impacts. But of course the companies work in isolation, they don't respond to one another's EISs. So it's particularly sad. But it's also just astonishing, given that they recognise the area as essential dugong habitat because of its importance to seagrass meadows. They still gave it approval and just gave warnings that any dugong needs to be reported and so on. But according to Lydia Gibson, who was the World WWF campaigner, she's no longer there. She's now working for another conservation group. But it's also been a reported birthing site for humpback whales, Gladstone Harbour. So this harbour that we've been told is this hopelessly industrialised and polluted area is actually an incredibly rich marine environment. There's at least 3 species of dolphins for which this region is habitat. The Indo-Pacific humpback dolphins, again, I was just looking on the WWF website a couple of days ago. There's now research suggesting that the Indo-Pacific humpbacks in Queensland waters are quite possibly unique species, that they're genetically distinct from other Indo-Pacific dolphins, but they're still researching that. But what was particularly sad when Drew and I were up there and one of the locals took us out in his boat, they reported that there was one pod of dolphins that were in the inner harbour between Curtis Island, regularly frequented between Curtis Island and the mainland, that haven't been seen in many months. But they are mainly there's also another species of dolphin on the eastern side, and I'll come to another dolphin on the next slide, I think. This one, the snub-nosed dolphin, which is to the north of Curtis Island, and the Fitzroy River Delta. We do know it has been confirmed. In 2005, a doctoral student was able to prove that the snub-nosed dolphin is unique to the Fitzroy River Delta in Kemper Bay. It is often was thought it was, it's very similar to the Irrawaddy River dolphin, but it's actually unique to the Fitzroy. And there's less than 100 of them, so and we'll see that there's all sorts of plans to expand the port even further, and that will definitely impact on the snub-nosed. Of course, these beautiful shallow waters and these vegetated islands, offshore islands, are important habitat for a lot of migratory shorebirds, and again, all the EIS reports acknowledge that. And are really confident that somehow the birds are just going to avoid all the LNG construction. Also the Ridley's water mouse, of course, its main... Its biggest population was originally Moreton Bay. Do you want to take... I'll take her out.
I've got some books in the car.
Yeah, it takes you back, doesn't it? Yeah, I was just going to make the point that the water mouse, of course, used to be really large populations around Moreton Bay, and all Moreton Bay development has really threatened it. And I was really surprised to discover this when I was doing research about Gladstone. So they're now concerned, you know, one of its remnant populations, strong populations, has been around Gladstone, but now the foreshore clearing on both the mainland and the island are going to endanger it. This is another special bird. Terribly difficult getting a good photo of it though. The Capricorn yellow chat, because it only has 3 nesting sites, one of which is on Curtis Island, and the other is near the Fitzroy River Delta, where again there's expansions for ports planned. So it's a real concern because it's it's got a very restrictive habitat in which it can. And the other extraordinary thing is they've actually been doing a massive clearing of feral animals to preserve its habitat both on the mainland and on Curtis Island. Now this new development could bring in all sorts of new feral species that put it at risk again. This is just one of the photos that Drew and I took when we were in Gladstone Harbour, just showing that the construction and land clearing has started. It's not coming up very well. The locals, there's all sorts of restriction zones, so you can take your boat out on the harbour, but you're not allowed within, however, several hundred metres of both the Ports Corporation dredging and construction and the LNG dredging and construction. But this is, you can just see some of the foreshore clearing and dredging going on. That's looking towards Curtis Island there. They've got to, they'll be doing pile driving and construction dredging, because they're going to be building not just their LNG plants, they're actually going to be building port facilities. There's going to be tankers docking alongside the island. So of course the noise impacts on dolphins and dugongs will be very significant. But the GLNG EIS said it'll be fine, they'll just avoid the noise. Very sad.
migratory birds react to noise too, don't they?
Yes.
They don't feed properly and they get hungry as they
Can't find one another, can't make crossing. Yeah.
Is there anyway there's no food left in that greens?
If they've taken out the seagrass, yeah.
Is there any recourse to isn't the United Nations supposed to be coming to look at
Yes.
as a World Heritage Area? Is it the Great Barrier Reef, not one specific island, but just the whole region? And is there any chance that this
yes, it's going to be interesting that they have already expressed concern about these port expansions, and because it is happening in World Heritage Areas. So the Queensland government is going to be forced to defend what's happening, and I think, in marine it's going to be really interesting. Because, these are just some of the other obvious impacts that are recognised when Tony Burke signed off the approval. He said, well, these are the recognised impacts, we all agree. The next slide is got a little bit about, here I'm just giving you the names of the different, so GLNG, Santos and Petronas. I can't remember if the A I think stands for Asia Pacific LNG, that's Australian Pacific. ConocoPhillips and Origin, and then QCLNG is actually British Gas. And then there's a fourth conglomerate, and I've got it on a later slide.
Next one's going.
So as well as those problems already recognised, the federal government recognised that there would also be the issue with vessel speeds, with the amount of movement on the harbour, the amount of light and noise. They're worried about fuel spills. They want to minimise marine discharges and seagrass disturbance and bow wash, of course, bow wash, because it'll affect all the intertidal areas. And the only thing he said as he signed off was, we want you to limit all these things. Yes, you can go ahead, please limit these factors. So I've just put this photo in. This is an LNG tanker berthed in Western Australia, because of course their LNG industry is more advanced than ours. The question will be, I know from Capricorn Conservation Council were telling me the other day that the port expansions for their region are planned to, the dredging is so that 200,000 tonne carriers will be able to traverse the port. I don't know if that photo is actually a 200,000 tonne carrier or not. I know that Mackay Conservation Group are really worried because at the moment Abbott Point can only take a relatively small tanker. I don't know if you've seen photos of the size of the bulk carriers that China is now producing. They are extraordinarily huge ocean tankers, and they're very concerned that they'll try and dredge so deeply for these really big carriers. There was one other point I was going to make about the carrier. They had to do risk assessments because, of course, LNG is highly combustible, and they're all double hulled. And in their risk statements, they said, look, we know this LNG industry is really safe because in 30 years we've only averaged about 3 incidents per year, and that's included everything from fires to as long as nobody's hurt. No, it's black so they have to put, the tankers will require a tug to enter and exit Gladstone Harbour, and the state government has now made it a requirement that shipping as far south as Gladstone will need a pilot to go through Great Barrier Reef waters. Nonetheless, Gladstone Harbour actually has a history of tugs failing and tugs crashing into tankers. So,
huge waves. Huge waves.
Yeah, and we did see when we were up there, they've now, I should have put an image, they have fitted at least, I saw at least one tug on the harbour that's now been fitted for collisions with dugongs. It's now got rubber protectors around the bow so that if it hits a dugong...
It won't hurt the tank.
But yeah, there's actually problems with manoeuvrability. Gladstone Harbour isn't actually wide enough for the minimum standards that they'd like for these tankers, and they recognise that in the risk assessment, but they're really sure that because of the tug requirement that they'll be able to exit safely, and they only talk about the risk of a fireball affecting a carrier or maybe a neighbouring ship, but they've made it a requirement that every time an LNG tanker is exiting the port, all other shipping must cease. And for one company alone, it's only expected to be about 1 tanker per week, but that was again GLNG, which is not the biggest exporter. QGC will be bigger. They will be looking at 60 ships per week. The third company, 50 per year, I'm sorry. And then there's a fourth planned, of course, and a fifth on the drawing board stage. So we will be looking at least 1 tanker a day entering and exiting Gladstone Harbour.
And in those companies, what percentage share does China have in their shareholding?
Good question. Drew might be able to answer that one, but certainly Santos and Petronas, it's about 50% is Petronas.
You're talking about China?
China ownership.
No, the only one that's got Chinese money is Arrow.
Arrow.
Yeah, it's got a mixture of Shell and PetroChina. That's in the coal seam gas companies. I'm not sure to what extent they're investing in the port.
Well, no, but in Santos and them, I mean, surely they've got a big shareholding.
Santos has got a Malaysian-based company which is very large called Petronas.
And British Gas, of course, is completely British owned, fully, even though they're
but most of the gas is being sold to China. Most of the contracts have been signed so far with China.
These are just two useful illustrations of the shallow waters off the north of Curtis Island. And that's because Gladstone Ports Corporation, mainly been talking about coal seam gas, they wanted to, this is Balaclava Island, no, this is Balaclava Island, and it forms part of the mouth then of the Fitzroy River Delta. They want to hand that island over to Xstrata for their coal export terminal, and they want Xstrata to build new rail spurs to the island because they want to put additional, they've got plans, this is now future Gladstone Ports Corporation land. They want terminals on the mainland. They also want offshore. They recognise that the waters are going to be too deep for all of the planned coal and gas exports. So they actually want to have an offshore platform just off the north of Curtis Island. So this is why Capricorn Conservation Council is so worried. It's spreading north from Gladstone Harbour into Keppel Bay and the Fitzroy River Delta. And there's huge problems with acid sulphate soils near Gladstone, as well as they know Balaclava Island is largely acid sulphate soils. So but this just shows you why it's such great habitat for dugongs and turtles.
So that will affect Heron and Lady Elliot and those sort of places as well?
It will. I was talking to the locals about Heron and Lady Elliot because they're the most southern islands, and that's where most tourists go through Gladstone Harbour. So they were mainly saying, look, it's mainly going to be the increased shipping, so that tourists are going to be exiting through this industrial port. The federal government made note of their concerns about the Capricorn Bunko group of islands. I didn't bring a map though. They're the next off and then Keppel. So they are worried. They did recognise that, yeah, there's concerns about the increased shipping through these regions. And they've just said to the companies, go ahead, but be careful, basically. Yes, now, just the total volumes of dredging for Gladstone alone, we haven't yet got the figures for Abbott Point because that's still on the drawing board stage. But we know British Gas in their applications, they talked about moving 375,000 cubic metres for their construction dock, another 1 million cubic metres for their, what they call their offloading facility, in other words their terminal. APLNG requested permission for 900,000 cubic metres. By the time the federal government got to Santos, they didn't bother putting a limit on it, so they didn't have to estimate their volume. They're simply to fit in with Gladstone Ports Corporation, which has its own program. That's the next slide. Yeah, so in 2010, the Gladstone Ports Corporation received approval for the Western Basin Dredging and Disposal Project, which gave them approval to dredge 50 million cubic metres from Gladstone Harbour. That's because they want to expand Fisherman Island. They also want to develop Wiggins Island, which is a small island between Curtis and the mainland. And then they've got these future proposals up the north. So there's been, this is why it's a problem for the state government to just say it's the floods. Because the approval was given in 2010, they actually began in May this year. Normally they dredge about 100,000 cubic metres per annum through Gladstone Harbour to keep the channel open. Since May, the CEO of Gladstone Ports Corporation admitted that they have taken out 395,000 cubic metres in 4 months. And then just, I don't know if you noticed, a fortnight ago, the Courier Mail published fresh figures that they've taken out 700,000 cubic metres since May. And I emailed the journalist and said, where? You know, I've got Leo Cicino, who's the CEO's press release in which he says 395. He said, well, I was put on to the PR person at Gladstone Ports Corporation, and she said, well, we've taken 700,000. So it's a massive increase, and this is why locals are saying, is it really the floods? Because they know, and again, I think on the next slide I've got the figures of seagrass that, okay, it's coming up. But so,
Do you want to go back?
no, that's fine. So just note that the cumulative total so far for approval so far is for 52 million cubic metres to be dredged from Gladstone Harbour. And that, if they piled that all on the mainland, it would be a mountain. I saw one figure where WWF had estimated that, you know, if they put it on one football field, it would be 4 kilometres high. It's an enormous volume, and some of it is being dumped in the harbour, some of it is being used to reclaim areas around Fisherman's Landing. But it's only just started. But it's been a huge increase in the last 4 months.
So, sorry, the turtle deaths that we're hearing about coincide, do they correlate with the timing of this activity? So you say it's been happening
yes,
the last
but the
4
problem
months.
is that you know, we can't be sure. It's probably a number of factors, and the deaths haven't only occurred in Gladstone Harbour, but the deaths around Gladstone are much higher than normal. Mind you, they're much higher than normal everywhere. Moreton Bay's had a high death toll as well, all the way up to Townsville. Deaths of animals have been reported. But yes, the locals are saying they've never seen anything like the rate of deaths around Gladstone Harbour. And you know, many of them have lived through previous floods. And the other thing that the Gladstone locals are saying was that they actually had very little impact from the floods. Woonga Dam, which is their town water supply, did overflow, so there was a significant volume of fresh water went into the harbour, but nothing like what Rockhampton and Brisbane went through. So at the start of September, total turtle deaths were 843, and it's mainly, I gather, been the green turtles. What's been puzzling is that, you know, this doesn't explain, you know, fish. The seagrass beds, we know that dugongs and turtles depend on the seagrass beds, but there's also been reports of shark deaths. Dolphins don't, I suppose dolphins do fish in the seagrass. But yeah, it's the whole food chain that's feeling the effects, but these are the ones that people have mainly been concerned about.
But the mud crabs are okay.
Don't know about that.
They've been reporting, haven't they? I was looking on Lock the Gate, red spot
Yes.
on the fish, like the other fish, the smaller fish, aren't there? A lot of it.
Yes, and milky eyes.
Yes. And nobody can touch the water, even fishermen aren't allowed to.
That's right.
500 square kilometres which aren't allowed to be fished in.
Yes,
Really.
yes.
Is that right?
That's correct. 500 kilometres along the coast that's now no one's to fish in, including recreational fishers, and 7 fishermen have been hospitalised.
Yeah.
But what's been interesting about the eye disease, in 2008, there was flooding in the Rockhampton hinterland, but not in Rockhampton itself, and a dam burst, its pit wall burst. Ensham mine this was, and it released massive amounts of heavy metals, saline water into the Fitzroy River. following that release of water, there were fish deaths in the Fitzroy River Delta and the mouth of the river. And similarly with this eye disease. And there was biosecurity, we were instructed to do a testing and write a report about what had caused the fish disease. That's never been released, that report. And again, Capricorn Conservation Group Council have been complaining constantly because they're now on water quality committees for the Fitzroy, but no one will hand over the biosecurity report.
Who carries out biosecurity report? Is it the government or the industry?
That's the state government department. Yeah.
Funny that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why there's doubt in everybody's mind. Obviously, there's a link between flooding and increased silt loads covering seagrass meadows, and we have to accept that that's clearly going to be one of the factors. It just seems to me that there are other factors that they are just dismissing out of hand. And it's just a worry if depending on the instructions that the state government gives the scientists who have been appointed to panels to investigate, if they're not going to do the toxicology tests on the dead animals. And again, that was the complaint of the Gladstone locals when we were there in July, that every time they would report a dead animal, somebody from Durham would come and collect the animal, but then they'd say it was too decayed to do any testing of, or and yet the locals would say, look, there was no evidence of fish strike, the animal looked quite healthy, it didn't look starved. So they have been saying we want toxicology tests.
Why aren't they doing independent toxicology?
Yes.
Who's got the money?
Well, that's exactly right. We do. We need independent scientists, and we need people to take their sampling. Yeah, so that's the worry. I think I've got, So this is just a bit of information about the seagrass meadows. There's at least 7,000 hectares in that region. The Ports Corporation admits that they will remove 124 hectares and that they will have an impact on a further 1,600 hectares. So we're talking about them, even without the floods, they were planning to have negative impacts on at least a quarter of the seagrass meadows of a declared dugong sanctuary.
Sorry, Libby, what's that last word? Deep water, and then is that reef?
Yes, that's showing a reef, deep water, and then coastal. Yeah. And of course, this is a tragedy for Queensland, it's a tragedy for Australia, and it's a tragedy for the whole world, because there's been great concern about the loss of seagrass internationally. This is an estimate from a paper that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2006 that the world's lost a quarter of its seagrass meadows since scientists began recording them 130 years ago, and that the seagrass loss is as comparable as our loss of mangroves and coral reefs and rainforests. So the scientific community regards it as one of the threatened ecosystems on the planet.
Can I just add a little pointer? I don't know if everyone's aware of the blue carbon issue, and blue carbon is recognised for its sequestration